I stood there in the marble lobby of Vanguard Financial Partners on a crisp Chicago morning, the kind where Lake Michigan wind cuts right through your coat, and my badge simply refused to work. The scanner flashed angry red, beeped once like it was scolding me, and the security guard, a guy I'd nodded to every day for 10 years, gave me this puzzled, almost embarrassed look. "System says you're not on the list today." "Alex," he said quietly. "My name is Alexander Rivera, but everyone called me Alex." The compliance specialist who'd spent a decade quietly building the walls that kept bad money and worse partners out of our building. That moment hit like cold water. My desk on the 18th floor wasn't just cleared, it was gone. No chair. No dual monitors. Not even the faint coffee stain on the carpet where my old space heater used to sit. It looked like the space had been professionally erased. As if I'd never existed. Sophia Lang, my new manager who'd swept in 6 months earlier with her power suits and endless talk of velocity metrics, strolled past with that practiced smile. "Oh, Alex. HR mentioned you didn't respond to the exit forms. We assumed you'd moved on." Her voice was velvet over steel. I didn't yell. I just stood there letting the silence stretch, feeling the weight of everything I'd protected for a decade suddenly feel fragile. Sophia had arrived like a storm in tailored blazers, fresh from a rival firm with glowing recommendations about streamlining processes. Vanguard was a mid-sized investment bank handling everything from venture debt to international trade finance. And I'd been the invisible guardian. My system wasn't some fancy dashboard executives loved to screenshot. It was 3 layers deep, automated entity verification pulling from SEC, OFAC, and state registries, jurisdictional risk scoring that flagged anything touching sanctioned regions or high corruption indices, and a mirrored audit trail embedded in the back-end code that no one could touch without triggering silent alerts. I remembered the first time Sophia called me into her office. The walls smelled of fresh paint and ambition. "Alex, your validations are impressive, but they're creating bottlenecks. Clients want onboarding in days, not weeks. Velocity is value in this market." She leaned forward, manicured nails tapping a quarterly report showing our competitors' faster approval rates. I explained calmly that rushing opened doors to shell companies, money launderers, or entities violating export controls under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. One bad vendor could trigger federal penalties that dwarfed any quarterly bonus. She smiled thinly. "Be a team player. We'll circle back on the deep dives later." Those early weeks were slow building tension. I'd flag a Dubai-based logistics firm with mismatched tax IDs and ownership trails leading to a politically exposed person. Sophia would override, saying the deal was too time-sensitive. I'd log it privately, not in the shared drive she controlled, but in the system's own immutable ledger, time-stamped and hashed. Every override attempt left fingerprints in the code I'd written over 3 quiet years, using Python scripts masked behind a simple front-end interface. To her, it looked like clunky forms. To the system, it was anomalies being recorded in a secure vault accessible only through multi-factor authentication that required my specific biometric profile. I felt the isolation deepen. Colleagues who once appreciated the quiet protection now avoided my eyes in meetings. Sophia rerouted key vendor calls, shifted budget lines, and slowly pulled my access to dashboards. Realignment for efficiency, she called it. But I saw it for what it was, clearing the path for her promotion narrative. She wanted numbers, faster onboarding, higher throughput, to show the board. I was the brake pedal she resented. One particular afternoon stands out. We were reviewing a new supplier for a defense-adjacent client. The firm had clean-looking docs on the surface, but my scoring flagged expired business registrations in 3 jurisdictions and a registered address overlapping with known high-risk entities. I refused to approve. Sophia walked into my office, arms crossed. "Just approve the basics today." We'll handle the rest internally. When I pushed back, reminding her of potential FCPA violations and personal liability, her eyes narrowed. Some people adapt to momentum, Alex. Others get left behind. The threat lingered unspoken. As weeks turned to months, the pattern solidified. More overrides. More logs captured silently. I documented everything, not for revenge, but because I'd seen too many climbers like her leave messes for others to clean. The system wasn't just protection for Vanguard, it was my quiet legacy, built under budget and without recognition. Most people didn't know my name beyond the compliance lady, but executives slept easier knowing no major regulatory actions had hit us in years. Then came the Monday that changed everything. I'd arrived early as always, but the badge denial wasn't a glitch. Upstairs, HR confirmed no record of my objections. My personal effects were boxed somewhere I couldn't access. Sophia's final words echoed in the lobby. Without your name on the files, none of it traces back. Easy cleanup. I walked out into the Chicago wind without argument, carrying only the knowledge that my protocols had expiration triggers tied to my access. When those lapsed without proper handover, the safeguards would activate in ways she couldn't imagine. The real story was just beginning. By midday that same Monday, the cracks were already showing in ways Sophia couldn't control. Procurement teams started seeing strange error pings in the vendor management interface. Approved suppliers suddenly lacked supporting documentation trails. One senior analyst messaged her directly. The system is flagging 3 new onboardings as non-compliant. No validation reports attached. Sophia's reply was swift but revealing. Legacy system issue. I'm implementing a streamlined version. She didn't understand that there was no simple password or dashboard switch. The validation engine I'd built required chained authentication across multiple backend nodes, with each step generating cryptographic hashes stored off the main network in a secure, air-gapped mirror. When she forced manual approvals without completing the full sequence, those hashes failed to match, and silent alerts began propagating. It wasn't a glitch. It was the system doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect against unauthorized tampering. I wasn't in the office to witness the growing unease, but I could picture it from my apartment overlooking the river. The procurement floor would be quiet at first, people whispering near the coffee machine, Sophia calling junior analysts into her office, demanding passwords that didn't exist. One young guy later told me he stared blankly when she asked for the validated backend access. There isn't one master password, he explained. It's role-authenticated with biometric and time-based tokens. She reportedly lost her temper, accusing sabotage. The first real hammer fell Tuesday morning. Legal flagged urgent reviews on the 3 vendors Sophia had pushed through. Vendor A, secondary compliance docs expired months earlier. Vendor B, previous OFAC flag for shell company indicators. Vendor C, no verifiable corporate history past 2018 despite claiming decades of operation. Each carried Sophia's manual approval stamp, but no secondary sign-off, no digital signature chain, and mismatched metadata timestamps. Procurement tried pulling original logs. They came up empty or showed only my earlier rejection trails. The forged approvals had wrong font alignments, missing hash verifications, and copied initials that didn't match my actual signing patterns. You can't fake a proper cryptographic chain. Legal's expressions shifted from confusion to concern. One director quietly texted under the table during an emergency huddle. I spent those days in a strange limbo, neither fired formally nor employed. My phone stayed silent except for a single call from an old colleague warning me the system was acting possessed. Invoices started bouncing. A wire transfer to vendor B was blocked by bank compliance due to recipient name mismatch. Finance couldn't process payments. Clients began calling, frustrated by delays on approved suppliers. Sophia told everyone it was a temporary technical hiccup, but the tension was thickening like fog rolling off the lake. By Wednesday, more vendors triggered flags. The embedded logic I'd coded years earlier began surfacing historical rejections that should have blocked onboarding entirely. One particularly risky entity, a subcontractor tied to a government defense project, had been approved despite clear export control red flags. When that subcontractor reached out to the prime contractor, offering unauthorized access, the complaint landed like a bomb. Formal letters cited violations of onboarding protocols and potential ITAR breaches. Sophia locked herself in meetings, cycling through calls with IT, trying to force overrides that only made the anomalies louder. The system I'd built resisted precisely because it was never meant for convenience. It demanded full documentation, business registrations, tax verifications, ownership disclosures, automated scoring. Any shortcut froze the process. She'd cut the seatbelt thinking it slowed her down, never realizing the car was heading toward a cliff. I reflected on the psychology of it all while sipping coffee alone. Sophia wasn't evil in the cartoon sense. She was ambitious, driven by a corporate culture that rewarded visible metrics over invisible safeguards. She'd called me a vestige of old thinking in one heated exchange. But that old thinking had kept Vanguard clean, no major fines, no scandals through volatile markets and global deals. I was the dam holding back regulatory floods, and she decided to dynamite it for faster flow. The quiet dread spread. Voices lowered in hallways. People avoided eye contact with Sophia. She pushed harder, demanding faster resolutions. But each demand exposed more gaps. The backend logs pulsed with undeniable evidence of bypass protocols, all time-stamped to her tenure. She thought deleting my access deleted the truth. But truth had been baked into the code itself. Thursday brought the external auditors, unannounced, as part of a routine compliance spot check that suddenly felt anything but routine. The lead auditor, a measured man with wire-rimmed glasses and a scuffed briefcase, zeroed in on one particular file within 30 minutes. Not the vendor itself, initially, but the approval signature at the bottom. My initials, forged clumsily. The file had failed jurisdictional vetting twice under my review, with ownership tied to a high-risk region near sanctioned territories. He tapped the screen. Who authorized this? Legal pulled records. The timestamp aligned with Sophia's early control period. Edit trails showed database-level bypasses, corrupted metadata, and manual entries lacking proper signature flow. These initials were copied, he stated flatly. This constitutes falsification. The room went still. Clause references from the company's risk charter were pulled. Knowingly falsifying compliance documents triggered personal liability. Minimum $500,000 per incident, plus regulatory disqualification risks. More files surfaced by noon, each bearing the same pattern: previously rejected assessments overwritten with forged approvals. Legal's alarm grew visible. Directors exchanged glances. Sophia was pulled from her strategy session for questioning. She tried explaining timing pressures and legacy system issues, but the evidence mounted. I learned details later through back channels. The whistleblower evidence, timestamps, version histories, internal communications began circulating internally, all traced back to the mirrored logs I'd secured. Sophia's private email surfaced, including one stating she'd claim I ghosted and that without my name, files wouldn't trace back. That line became the smoking gun. Lawsuits arrived like dominoes. A federal agency cited onboarding breaches and export control failures, penalties potentially reaching millions. A blacklisted vendor sued for wrongful cutoff after initial approval and payment. Internally, anonymous evidence packages landed with airtight documentation. Sophia's world contracted rapidly. Her laptop was seized, badge suspended, phone secured. In the closed-door session with counsel and regulators, her voice cracked under direct questions about source authority and verification. It was verbal understanding, she offered weakly. The room's temperature dropped. The SEC liaison let silence stretch before noting the clear intent in her writings. The psychological weight pressed on everyone. Colleagues who'd sided with momentum now faced accountability questions. Sophia, once striding halls with confidence, now appeared diminished, breathing permission to speak. Intent had been documented in plain language. Discovery processes loomed with subpoenas ready to unravel everything she'd touched. By Friday, the first public ripples hit financial wires. Stock dipped noticeably. Clients suspended new business. Partners demanded contract rollbacks. The board convened urgently. The emergency board session convened before dawn in the executive conference room overlooking the Chicago skyline. No pleasantries, just cold facts. CFO presented exposure estimates in 7 figures and climbing. Compliance had laid out timelines of unauthorized approvals, mismatched logs, and rejected files turned green post my departure. Directors pressed, why bypass protocols during a documented intake period? Why remove the certified validator without replacement? Sophia's responses faltered, timing issues, realignment. Documents slid across the table, her emails, empty handoff reports, unviewed system exports. The chairman asked if she'd verified my final materials. Her quick yes was countered by metadata proving otherwise. The room's judgment was surgical. No raised voices. Just clinical assessment. Systemic failure tied directly to dismissal of key risk personnel. Termination was approved unanimously. Stock continued falling. Headlines screamed compliance fraud. Whistleblower evidence. Federal inquiries. SEC letters arrived with FinCEN copies. Sophia's office was cleared overnight. Name removed from directories. I watched from afar, coffee cooling in my hand. The institutional memory finally named my role properly in minutes, validator of record. A designation Sophia had dismissed as self-important now etched permanently. Weeks later, the call came from Ironfield Strategies, specialists in pre-IPO regulatory architecture. They'd reviewed filings, noted my system's sophistication. We need someone who builds containment before problems arrive, the recruiter said. I accepted advisory role, but insisted on bringing my protocols. Sitting in morning light, watching leaves fall, I opened my secure folder, immutable rejection trails, real history preserved. Sophia's downfall left questions lingering. How often do corporations prioritize speed over safety until the crash? The evidence believed me. The quiet guardian's work endured.